An aesthetically pleasing, half-floating coffee table like this is a relatively easy task, and today I'll show you how I built this. The frame of the table I'll be making from steel, which means today we're going to be welding. Welding is a fabrication process that joins materials, usually metals or thermoplastics, by using high heat to melt the parts together and allowing them to cool, causing fusion. There are many different types of welding. They're even welding underwater nowadays. Google it, it's true. Welding is different to lower temperature techniques such as soldering or brazing, which do not melt the parent materials. Now I'm wanting the chunky look, so I will be using 50 by 50 3mm square tubing for the frame, and for the tabletop I'm using a sheet of 25mm Seligna. So I'm going to start by cutting all of my steel, and for that I'm using a chop saw outside. You can use an angle grinder, but a chop saw is a lot more accurate and easier to use. My table is a square design, so we need 8 pieces of 600 by 600 with each end cut to a 45-degree miter cut. And while I'm here, I'm also cutting the 2 uprights that will join the top and bottom frames. These are square cuts at 300mm long. So all my pieces are cut to size, and with a grinder I'm going to deburr the edges in preparation for the welding. Now, as you probably know, my DIY super interest is timber-based. I love timber. Hence why the table. But when it comes to my welding ability, I'd rather not show my welding skills off in public. Well, not just yet. So I've asked Brad, who's done a fair amount of welding in his time, to give me a hand with the welding. Let's get our PPE sorted. It's crucial that you take care of yourself here. Heavy-duty welding gloves, a welding apron or a fire-retardant jacket, trousers and boots, no socks and slops, and most importantly, a distant auto-darkening welding helmet.
Thanks, Kev. I'll take that.
Okay, I'm not going to argue this one. It's yours. This is the Diston 140 amp inverter welder. It only weighs 3.2 kilos, it's extremely portable and is more than suitable for stick welding jobs, and with the right accessories, the same welder can also do tungsten inert gas welding, commonly known as TIG welding. Now today we are stick welding, which is where one uses an electric current to strike an arc between the base material and the welding rod or stick, typically made of either mild or stainless steel and covered with a flux that protects from oxidization. In essence, we're melting the stick, and these are also available in different sizes or thicknesses to cater for your workpiece thickness. We're forming a pool of molten steel that melts the 2 workpieces together to form the welded joint. Now, practice makes perfect, but when you get it right, it's like art, apparently. Once cooled, the remaining flux should be chipped off with a chipping hammer. One of the last fundamentals we need to understand before we start welding is that stainless steel welding rods can be used on mild steel as well as stainless steel work. However, stainless steel workpieces should only be welded with stainless steel rods. Let's get welding. So I've laid a sheet of 2mm off-cut sacrificial steel on the workbench. You really don't want to scorch your solid yellow wood dining room table. And we're going to start with welding the 2 square frames. So line up your first 2 workpieces, and then using a welding magnet, position this to hold the 2 pieces together. This really is a must-have, simple yet useful tool when welding. It caters for both 90 and 45 degrees, and it acts as a third hand that is not sensitive to heat, while also ensuring that the angles are accurate. As we need to create an electrical current between the workpiece and the welding rod, we need to connect the ground clamp to the workpiece to ensure good contact. Now, if there is rust or excessive paint that could prevent contact, you will need to scrape this to bare metal, and a wire brush works really well for this. Right, Brad, you're up.
All right, Kev. So one of the most important things to do is to, first of all, get your electrode size right and to set the amperage on the machine correctly. Having your amperage too low, your electrode is going to stick in your job. Having your machine set too high, you're just going to burn a hole through your workpiece.
And this Diston 140 has the stick size marked on the front and not the amperage, which makes it quite easy as a starting point. 3mm steel, we're using a 2.5mm welding rod, so we can set that to 2.5 and fine tune it from there.
Out of preference, I'm going to be using a 2.5mm stainless steel rod. Stainless is a harder metal, and the stainless rod gives a better finish on the end weld. You know what, let me just show you.
Cool.
Okay, you can see on the left hand side we've used a stainless steel electrode, and on the right hand side we've got the mild steel electrode. You can tell the difference between the 2.
That stainless steel weld is absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's almost a form of art.
Okay, we're going to tack this up first. This just helps us ensure that we got our angles correct, and once we've done that, we can give it a full weld along the seam. A tack weld is a small weld on the joint that allows us to check the angles before we do a full weld on the seam. It's also easy for us to ground the tack welds off if we need to adjust the workpiece at all.
Let's take all the corners for the first square.
All right, Kev, I'm happy with that. Kev, because of the size of our steel section, our earth clamp won't fit onto it, so instead I'm going to earth onto our steel worktop.
And because this is all virgin steel, there's no rust, there's no paint, the earth will go through the sheet and into our project.
When welding, it's important to keep your stick between a 15 and 45 degree angle. Being as stable as you can throughout the weld definitely has its benefits on the finish of the weld. Keeping your arc length as consistent as possible, keeping your speed as consistent as possible. And if your arc length gets too much and you bring your electrode too far away from the job, the spark will extinguish. If you find on your workpiece that you have a small gap between the joints that you're welding, it does help to have a small circular motion while trying to fill in the seam, just to create a bigger weld pool and fill in the joint that you need to fill.
So the first square of our framework is done, and Brad is going to do exactly the same and build a second square. But Brad, first, when I weld, often I find that my welding will stick and I've got to twist it and yank it. Why is that happening?
Kev, that'll usually occur if your amperage on your welding machine is set too low. In order to fix that, you can turn your amperage up and try and move along the seam a little bit faster.
Let's get that second square done. So as we did earlier, we're going to lay out our pieces and using the welding magnet in the corner, tack each corner, and once we see that all 4 corners are square and true, we can go in and complete the final weld. With both pieces done and before joining the 2 squares, Brad and I are going to take these outside and grind all the welded joints to a smooth, uniform finish. Now stand them up on their sides and join them using the 300mm length on 2 opposite corners. Again, we're going to use the magnet to ensure that everything is square and straight and also support it while Brad does the initial tack weld. Brad, before you finish off these welds, let's just have a quick check. Spot on. And diagonally.
Can't get better than that, Kev.
Hey, good job. The last welding step is to tack a strip of 25mm angle iron face down to each side. Now this is where the 25mm Seligna tabletop timbers will rest. And as both are 25mm, it makes it easy to line up. We're going to be using G-clamps to hold the angle iron in place while doing the tack welds. You will however notice that this angle iron is red, and that is because it's been painted with red oxide to prevent the rust, quite common in the coastal areas. These I've cut to 300mm long, and Brad is going to weld these into place on the center of each square frame. Now we're using an offcut of the Seligna, and we're going to work upside down, like so that when we turn the table over, the Seligna sits flush with the top of the frame. So that's the welding complete. Brad, thanks a lot. You really made it look so easy. Seriously, I owe you one.
That's not a problem, Kev, anytime.
Thank you. Now, before we move on to the tabletop, and as we want to preserve the steel, I'm going to be coating the metal surfaces using Rust-Oleum hammered black spray paint, which has a primer and a color all in one. But before we apply any paint, be sure to wipe down the steel with thinners to remove any oil or grease. Otherwise, your paint's not going to stick. You may even need to use some water and dishwashing liquid, depending on how contaminated the steel is. Then simply follow the instructions and spray away. While that dries outside, let's get onto the part that excites me, the timber. I need to cut the Seligna sheet into 2 600 by 600mm pieces. And for that, I've got the Ironhill Mini Circular Saw, a lightweight and compact cordless tool. Now with our pieces cut, we're going to give the timber a really good sanding, remembering to sand the edges and gently round the corners a bit. I'm then going to give each of these boards 3 coats of Woodock 30. It's a clear solvent-based poly-wax sealer that not only does a great job at protecting the timber, but really allows the red tones of the Seligna to pop out. Now Woodock recommend a minimum of 3 coats, allowing it to dry properly between coats. And always remember, paint with the grain. So our 3 coats of Woodock have dried, we can now get the timber into the framework. Welding is really an art that both you and I can learn, and the best way to learn is to ask a friend for some help and to practice. Personally, very impressed with the outcome of this coffee table. Now Builders has a range of welding machines, as well as all the PPE and the accessories that you need to get that welding job done. These are available both in-store or online at builders.co.za. For more videos like this, check out the blog on the website. Get to Builders, get it done.